All right, gang. Well, now we're getting into the nitty gritty of lab once again. Okay, and we saw from lab on Monday that obviously this is probably the heaviest hitting part of lab. Okay, I'm looking at this page here. I'm like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things I got to memorize. Okay, a lot of things I got to know. Okay, I'm gonna give you some tips to try and break this down, and make it a little easier. Okay, so how do I make learning all this stuff easier? Okay, so make sure you know the terms, rather the anatomical terms for regions of the body. Okay, that's my first point. Remember, so for example, subclavian, okay, below the clavicle. All right, jugular, meaning the neck. Brachial, meaning the arm. Ulnar, meaning the ulna. Radial, meaning the radius, right? Make sure we have these terms memorized, because that is what is specifying where the specific artery or vein is in the body, okay? That's like the easiest way of knowing like where I can find these things, okay? Obviously there are a couple weird ones, okay? A couple weird numbered terms we talked about. Popliteal, for example, is a little bit of an oddball, right? Not really a term we really use that often. And then we have some also very, very unique ones, especially with the veins. So like cephalic vein or the basilic vein, saphenous vein, okay? Very unique examples there. But if you can get the main ones down, if you know the main ones, then you can get those oddballs out by studying those guys, okay? So if you know the terminology, like the back of your head, you're pretty much good to go. And you just got to know those other specific terms, cephalic, basilic, saphenous, and you should be good right there, okay? So that's my first tip right there. Here's another one. Arteries and veins are brother and sister. Most of the time, though. I'm going to say most of the time. Why do you say that, Tyler? That's because most of the time, you're going to encounter blood vessels, okay? Arteries and veins that have the exact same name. The only thing you're changing is the vein to the artery. For example, brachial artery, brachial vein, okay? They're brother and sister. They run right next to each other, okay? So we have the radial vein, radial artery, okay? So that's a great example right there. Left subclavian artery, subclavian vein, for example, okay? Most of the time you're going to have a brother and sister, okay? So obviously, like with the last bullet point, there are a couple oddballs here that don't have a brother and sister. But if you can get to understand the point that if you're going to have a brother and sister, then you're going to have a couple oddballs. You should be able to memorize the oddballs, okay? So understand arteries and veins, brother and sister. Most of the time you'll have two of them running next to each other. But you're going to have a couple of oddballs, okay? So make sure we get that. So we have that guy. And my last tip here. So start small picture and work big picture. What do you mean by that, Tyler? Start small with this stuff, okay? Don't try and memorize all this in one night, all right? Like I said, biting the elephant, all right? Always take little small bits of this and then work your way bigger, okay? It's going to be really hard to take in all this stuff in one day. So try and take small bites, for example. Just try starting with the head, right? Get these guys down first, okay? And then if you wanted to, you can move on and do the arteries, right? If you wanted to just move down and do the arteries. So, or if you wanted to match and match. So if you wanted to do the arteries that do the head, and then you also want to do the veins that are in the head, do those guys. But try and start small with this. So start small. Once you get those guys down, move on. Whether that be keep working on the arteries or work on the same region, but just with the veins instead, okay? So start small picture, work big picture. That's my big trick for this thing, for getting all this stuff down. A lot of stuff, doable. It's a lot of stuff, but it's doable. Just take small bites, and it'll come around. And stay consistent with learning this stuff, okay? I promise. You all will be fine if you just stay consistent with this. All right? So, small chunks here. Let's see what we got here, okay? So let's start with the arteries, okay? We have the aorta. Remember, the heart should be like in this region here. Okay, so we have the aorta here. It's going to come up and form the aortic arch. Remember, we had 3 specific vessels of the heart last week that we needed to know. Okay, that's the brachiocephalic trunk, Then we have the left common carotid, and the left subclavian. Okay, left subclavian supplies everything in the arm. Okay, that's all you got to know. So it supplies everything in the arm here, and we know that because the subclavian, as we can kind of point, it's going to be running down the arm here. Okay, so it supplies everything, just basically going down the arm. Okay, upper limb. Left common carotid. All right, that's going to go up and supply left side of the head. Okay, so in contrast on the right side. Okay, I mean, not really in contrast. You have two left and right common carotid, but the right side will eventually split into what we know as the internal and external carotid arteries down here, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay, so right and left supply the head and the brain. Okay, very, very important vessels. Okay, without blood to the brain, we're toast. So these are the very important guys we always got to try and protect. All right. Right subclavian, this is going to go and supply everything in this arm, the right side. So the right subclavian and the right common carotid all stem from the brachiocephalic trunk right here. Okay, the left and the right don't have one. Okay, just the right side does. All right, arteries of the head and neck here. So we got these guys out of the way. So let's just cross these off. We just talked about them. Okay. We could talk about the axillary artery just real quick. So the axillary artery, it's an artery that it's kind of deep up into your armpit. Okay, that's what it supplies blood to. Okay, the armpit. That's all you really got to know here. But doesn't really do a ton of justice because we're supposed to be talking about the arteries of the head and neck. Okay, internal carotid, external carotid. Okay, what's the difference? Internal carotid, okay, is going to supply blood up into the head. Okay, specifically, it's going to supply blood into the vein. Okay, so as you can kind of see here, we have two. So we have the internal carotid. We can see how when it dives deep into the skull, we can kind of see how those vessels are kind of starting to fade out a little bit. Okay, so compared to the external carotid artery, what that is doing is it's not as faded out because what that is supplying is the arteries of the face, scalp, and the neck. Okay, versus the internal goes up to the brain, external, face, scalp, and neck. All right, so that's that guy right there. All right, scroll down. Veins now. Okay, veins now. Veins are a little different, remember? So we don't have a carotid vein. Okay, we don't have an internal carotid. We don't have an external carotid vein. What we have is they're called jugulars. Okay, internal jugular, external jugular vein. Okay, a lot of people can see these jugular veins. Okay, and that's because whenever someone is weightlifting, or whenever someone is weightlifting is probably the best example. Okay, whenever you're weightlifting, if you ever notice or you look at someone, their head gets really, really red. Okay, that's because the internal pressure is building up super high. So what you're seeing is you might see those veins pop out of someone's neck. Okay, and that's the jugular veins that you're seeing. Okay, the jugular veins in the neck. So whenever you're weightlifting, deadlifting, bench pressing a lot of weight, you might see those veins start to pop out of the neck. That's what those guys are. The internal, external jugular veins you're seeing. Okay, so they're different. They're not carotid, but they're jugular for veins. Okay, but they have the same name for subclavian, axillary, and brachiocephalic. Because remember, we had arteries for these guys. Their brother-sister relationship. They have an axillary, brachiocephalic, and subclavian. Okay, so for the guys that are different, I'm going to circle them. Okay. For everyone that has a brother and sister, I'm just not even going to mark them. So the guys that are different, I'm going to circle them. Okay. All right. Let's move down a little bit here. So now that what we're looking at is the heart, for example, would be up here. Okay. So these are the arteries of the abdominal aorta and its major branches. Heart here, aorta right here. Okay. So this is called the descending aorta. What we have here, we have something called the celiac trunk. Okay. We have superior mesenteric artery, renal artery, aorta, inferior mesenteric artery. We have all this stuff, okay, as it's coming down. Okay, we have all this different stuff as it's coming down, okay. Well, let's start from the most superior vessel here, okay, and that is the celiac trunk, all right. So the celiac trunk, the most superficial, what that is doing is it's supplying blood to the stomach, liver, and the spleen, okay. So this is going to break off and to become the left and right gastric artery. All right, it's also become the hepatic artery and also the splenic artery. Okay, so that's this guy, so celiac trunk. Okay, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric. Okay, so mesentery, that's referring to the intestines. Okay, so the superior mesenteric is well, specifically, superior mesenteric is going to be supplying the small intestine and the proximal large intestine. Okay, versus the inferior mesenteric artery is going to be supplying the distal large intestine, okay? So that's the only difference here. So superior, what this guy is going to do, let's see if I can write this out. Superior mesenteric. What this guy is going to be supplying, okay, small intestine. I can remember this guy because of the S, right? Superior small intestine. And also the proximal large intestine, okay, versus the inferior mesenteric, that is going to distal large intestine. All right, those guys there. Let's get my spelling errors corrected. All right, that's those guys, superior, inferior. Renal artery going straight to the kidneys. We can see that. These are the kidneys right here. Okay. We also have these guys down here, the common iliac artery. Okay. So when we have this, we're actually super far down now. Okay. So we're really far down into the pelvis basically here. Okay. So the common iliac artery. So super far down, a little bit inferior. It's going to branch off because remember we have something called a common carotid artery. So similar down here, we have a common iliac artery. Internal is going to go and supply the structures of the pelvis, okay? External is going to go and supply the structures of the lower leg, okay? So we have internal iliac is going to be for the pelvic structures. All right, and then we have the external iliac, and this is for lower extremity, all right? That's pretty much all we got to know here, okay? That's all we got to really know here. These two little fun points, and then we got the all the big vessels here, okay? All right, and now we're going to talk about the celiac trunk. So it's blown up here, okay? So compared to up here, we just kind of had like a little, just chat about it, what it supplies. Down here, we can see what it's actually supplying, okay? So celiac trunk supplying the stomach because we have a right gastric and we have a left gastric artery referring to the stomach, okay? We also have a splenic artery here supplying the spleen right here, okay? And then we also have the, where is it? The common hepatic artery. That is going to be going up, supplying gallbladder, also the liver here, okay? So, big vessels here, left, right gastric, splenic, common hepatic, all right? All going up, supplying these guys here, okay? And then we have the superior mesenteric artery here, but that's not as important as we were really just talking about the celiac trunk here, okay? Scrolling down just a little bit, this will be the last one I talk about for this video. So arteries of the upper abdomen. So part B here, branches of the celiac trunk with arterial supply to the abdomen. Left gastric artery, right gastric artery, splenic artery, faded out. Remember this one goes to the spleen. Common hepatic artery, this one goes up to the liver, okay? So that's it for these vessels here. Gonna take a little break, come back, and we'll keep working here. Okay, keep working on all these vessels here. There's a lot of them, like I said. All right.